everyone. I'm Megan Kaspar. I am Managing Director and Co-founder at FirstLight, which is a blockchain agnostic investment technology firm, and also most notably known for being a founding member, along with Danny from Drop, in Red DAO, which is a DAO that's focused on proliferating all of the opportunities in the digital fashion ecosystem. So that's a little bit about my background, and then how do you want to do the format or the flow? Do you just want me to go through the questions?
Yeah, I think from my understanding, that was what you were limited to for compliance reasons, I think, was it?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. So I'll just sort of read the questions and then give answers, and then anyone can sort of chime in, and I can elaborate on certain topics as well. There are just things that I have to give notices for. So like questions around the VIA trunks and Louis Vuitton. I'll just, give a disclosure that I'm never speaking on behalf of Louis Vuitton. I'm not an employee. I just advise them around Web3 initiatives. So I'm speaking on behalf of myself and my personal experiences. So the first question actually has to do with Louis Vuitton and around the trunks, the physical connected products, and the individual asked if I could share more about my involvement in the project and how the combination of the physical and digital elements sort of were ushered in, I suppose, and then share insights on aspects of the VIA trunk, like what didn't work as expected and if there were challenges. So yeah, I guess sort of the whole initiative is to slowly create a new foundation inside of the brand with Web3 technical shifts. And it's working quite well. It's a very easy, smooth process. Everyone that onboarded reported back that it was, a very easy transition, simple for them to connect their wallet. The payment provider used was BitPay, so it was a very easy, smooth process for everyone, and it's worked really well. All the holders, Louis Vuitton launched a Discord channel specifically for the VIA holders, so we're all in that channel. We can communicate with each other and communicate with the Louis Vuitton advocates that are in the Discord channel that share information on upcoming drops. They've already hosted an event in Europe this year for VIA holders. And then also the Speedy bag from the Pharrell show dropped, and there will be one more item that drops before the end of the year. I'm not sure I can share too much information on that, so that'll be an exciting piece that comes out. And again, it's physical and digital, so there's a physical component tied to the digital piece. And it's interesting because a lot of these brands that I have consulted with or spoken to, they've all integrated in their Web3 roadmap the mechanism or mechanics of token gating, membership, and loyalty. So it's like more of the idea of being able to prove on chain that you own assets or a series of assets that will then unlock exclusive access to physical events or more physical products. So it's really creating this highly exclusive, like pretty well curated environment that's all tracked on chain. And I think, where we're going from Web 2 to Web 3, I always talk a lot about the shifts that'll happen socially online, whether it's in social media platforms or social reality or gaming, but really being able to show the digital flex. Right now, a lot of the assets that all of us own, we can't prove that we own them. We can show photos of them, but if you're proving on chain that you own it in your wallet, it becomes sort of this stronger way to confirm ownership of assets. So it's pretty interesting. And again, if anyone wants to chime in after I go through each question, I'm happy to elaborate on on any of it. So maybe just use your hand. I think that's how we do it here, is there's a hand raising feature.
So questions are likely to come through in the chat, and if residents would want to ask via voice, they can request, which I can approve afterwards.
Okay, cool. All right, yeah, so just let me know. The second question was around SYKY. There was someone who missed the call time for the launch of the collective, and they were wondering if there's another cycle for the SYKY collective. And the answer is yes. They will run annual cycles every year for the SYKY collective, and the next one will likely be in March or April. So definitely watch out on SYKY's socials for that. And let's see, the next question is sharing a little bit about my journey, how it started, the defining point in my career. There's really no defining point. My life has sort of just been this interesting series of catching these bubbles or waves that have interested me. I was led to Los Angeles for my undergrad, and while I was there, I was working for a venture capitalist, and that sort of led me down the path. At the same time, around the same time, someone very close to me was mining Bitcoin in 2010, and I read the Bitcoin white paper and became interested, but I still sort of thought it was a scam. And about a year later, the venture capital firm I was working for had asked for some different options or ideas around investment opportunities that they currently weren't investing in. So I showed them the Bitcoin white paper, took a pretty big deep dive into it, and it led me to a large group of founders and creators, Brock Pierce being one of them, creating Bitropolis in Los Angeles and Santa Monica. And I knew then I would spend the rest of my career in crypto and blockchain. And yeah, it's just sort of been this really interesting wave. In 2015, I started to see where the fashion industry, excuse me, be disrupted by this technology. And we started to sort of craft and come up with ideas and mechanics on how that would work. And it's really cool to see all of these things unfolding over the last 2 and 3 years. So I'm a very curious person. It's a characteristic of mine that it's kind of annoying to people that are close to me, because I'm always asking why, and I'm very curious on how structures work. And I think that curiosity has just led me to the place I am now in my career. I'm just a continuously curious person. And the next question is, what has been my fuel for keeping innovation? So for me, the reason I wake up every day is decentralization and sustainability. Again, I'm a very curious person, and as a child, I would always ask like why certain things are the way they are, because I really didn't understand why we would create such an inefficient world, and one that really isn't sustainable and doesn't have a lot of decentralization that empowers the individual. And through blockchain technology and dematerialization of our physical world into digital, it really provides us the opportunities to have many things that we don't have in the world today. So that really drives me. I'm doing a deeper talk on decentralization on Wednesday through the SYKY community as a mentor. So anyone here that would be interested and is not currently a Keystone holder, I'm happy to gift you a Keystone. Just reach out to me on Twitter or Instagram before Wednesday, obviously, and I can get you set up. So that'll be a really great talk, because decentralization is really near and dear to my heart. It's very important, and I feel like well, we'll go into it on Wednesday, but there are many people that still don't understand the nuances between decentralization and centralization. And I have a lot of people, especially in the digital fashion, ask me, they believe that or they have this preconceived notion that, if anything is using crypto or blockchain, that it immediately makes it decentralized, which is not the case at all. And it's another thing that it's really interesting how that Facebook changed their name to Meta. Of course, Facebook is farthest from centralization or decentralization. They're the most centralized entity, and really when it comes to exploiting and extracting data from its users and not compensating them and not giving them the ownership of that data, that's what that platform does. So, really knowing the differences. Just because somebody is using crypto or NFTs or blockchain, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's decentralized. And there's over, I don't know, 8,000 different blockchains and cryptocurrencies listed, and not all of them are decentralized as well. Most people, Flow is another example, is it's absolutely not a decentralized blockchain, and a lot of people think it is. So it's really important to become educated in that specific sense. And the next question is, what advice would I give to emerging fashion innovators to accelerate their journey? There's three main key points. One is to, we'll go into decentralization again, to understand and prioritize decentralization. So the true ethos of Web3 is to ensure really understanding the true ethos, and then ensure that your initiatives prioritize decentralization. It gives back power and control to the users and creators. The second would be to stay educated and updated. The Web3 and blockchain landscapes are rapidly evolving. So being able to stay on top of the latest trends and advancements and shifts in the ecosystem is really important. So deeply familiarizing yourself with the technology, with smart contracts, how to integrate them with decentralized platforms is also imminent. And understanding the technical side can inform your creative and business decisions. So it can be really helpful. And then in that, also ensuring security. So given that there's an increasing number of hacks and security breaches in the crypto ecosystem, prioritizing security on your platforms and for your users is also really important. And then the third would be regulatory awareness. So regulations around digital assets, cryptocurrencies, and blockchain technologies are still being developed in many jurisdictions. So you really want to be aware of the potential regulatory impacts that could be imposed on your initiatives. For example, there's a license coming out of New York that looks like will be imminent for anyone that's putting real world assets or digital collectibles on chain or physical collectibles. So really following those regulatory guidelines is important. And then we'll go to the next question. What are the most important character traits for leadership? Over the course of my career, I've really honed in and pinpointed on those characteristics because it's important for me as an investor to find those characteristics and traits in the people that I back and that I invest in. And I really focus on 9 key characteristic traits that are driving factors for strong leadership. The first one is curiosity, which is just a desire to learn and an interest to understand the world around you, which can drive innovation and growth. The second is vision, so being able to see opportunities that others may overlook, and having a clear sense of direction to that North Star is really, really important. The third is dedication or commitment to excellence or success in whatever field or project that you're working on. So really being able to strive for the best, setting high standards for yourself and your team. These things don't happen overnight. So having consistency and dedication to following your North Star is important. The fourth is emotional intelligence, so really understanding and managing one's own emotions as well as recognizing the influence of emotions of others and being able to build those relationships in teams. It's a really important factor. And then 5, 6, 7, and 8 all have to do with emotional intelligence. I think that having a high amount of integrity, decisiveness, your ability to listen, adaptability, these are all important key factors. And then the ninth one would be my favorite, taking risks and then managing those risks well. So being able to assess and manage risk is very crucial, especially in the world of crypto and finance. So being able to take calculated risks and understanding the potential of those consequences and those decisions is really important. Let's see, the next question is, how do you envision the future of bridging the gap between URL and IRL fashion products? Furthermore, how do you assess the value of AR fashion given the widespread use of filters and try-on experiences? What strategies would you recommend for content creators to enhance value and profitability to extended reality fashion? I think that marketing and business model disruption is definitely coming, will come from AR digital fashion. I've been a huge proponent of it, very excited for all the disruption that'll come around it since 2016. And we're still very early, obviously. The use cases are still pretty wonky, or the platforms, I should say. But I'm hopeful that within the next few years, with the launch of near eye wearables, we'll have better technology that will facilitate, better virtual try-ons, but more so in real time usability. So almost I see reality as this gaming opportunity where in real time we can accessorize ourselves and share our digital fashion with others without having to be in virtual reality or inside of a game. But really these digital contextual in real time overlays that we can interact with through physical reality. So very excited for that, and I'm definitely bullish on this as a new business opportunity. Next question is, what advancements within Web3, blockchain technology, and digital fashion do you recommend designers monitor and stay informed about? Anything that's shifting and changing the technology and the ability to use the technology. It's always good to follow all of the blockchains on Reddit and all the social channels and platforms, and also digital fashion thought leaders. SYKY does a really good job of sharing and channeling information to their keystone holders. Sorry, they do such a great job of providing insights and information and data. So that's also a really good source to gather information from. Number 10 is, could you share some insight into what you believe makes a successful pitch, and what do you consider when evaluating a company or a project for potential investment? Regarding pitches, there are 3 really important sort of traits or characteristics that I look for. The first one is a clear narrative. So a pitch should clearly communicate what problem is being solved, and why the company is uniquely positioned to solve it, and also why now is the right time for the solution. So timing is everything when it comes to startups. I've seen and known many people that have created solutions to problems and they were incredible, but the timing for the market was just off, so they missed the opportunity. So timing is important, but also the narrative and being able to clearly express that narrative around what it is you're solving. So the third would be, the second would be being able to simply explain your value proposition. So I always tell founders, if you can't write it on the back of a napkin and explain it that easily, it's not going to be received in a very simple manner. So it's best to be able to compose all of your thoughts and ideas in a very simple, easy, digestible way for the investor to understand. And the third would be address the market. So what's the addressable market size, the potential market size that you're going after? This is really important to include in your deck and pitch material, so that you know which market you're going after, and then also your investors are, whether they're educated or not in the market, but you're showing them that you know exactly, where you're leading and guiding the ship and where you're looking to extract value out of a market. I generally advise startups to initially focus on a small niche market, that they can dominate before expanding to a larger market. One mistake that I commonly see is founders, going after crazy massive markets and not being able to really pinpoint a specific sector inside of that market. So if you can really show, okay, here's the overall market size, but we're going to focus on this niche piece of the market, take this over before expanding. It's a really valuable to have in your deck. And then there's 5 main factors that I evaluate when looking at a company or a project for potential investment. The first is the value proposition. It has to be unique and non-consensus. So I have to be able to identify contrarian ideas that can lead to large market opportunities. The founding team is really important. And then the dynamics of that team are also very crucial. So I believe that the alignment and understanding of the co-founders are essential for the startup success. And I often assess their personal histories and their relationships together to figure out the dynamics between the team to make sure that it's going to be long lasting. Because as an investor, it's always difficult when you're with a team that's constantly facing issues and team members have to leave, and then there's cap table problems and distribution issues with equity. So these are things that can sort of be mitigated in the beginning if you find team members that have a good, succinct cohesion from the start. And then the long-term vision of the project. So just really making sure that the founders aren't chasing short-term trends, which I saw with a lot of different startups in this last bull cycle. They were very much focused on the short-term trend, value extraction, and not long-term vision. So being able to solve a big problem that will matter in the future is really important. The next would be traction and momentum. So really making sure that there's a unique idea that's essential to the project, and being able to show there's evidence that the startup is gaining traction. So that could be in the form of user engagement, revenue growth, or any other significant metric that can be shown that there's actual traction and momentum for the project or the product that's being built. And then founders, in my opinion, should always have skin in the game in some dimension. So they need to be deeply invested in their venture, not just financially, but also emotionally and intellectually. So I very much value commitment and dedication when I'm looking at these dimensions of a startup team. The next question is, could you suggest resources, books, articles, white papers for those of us interested in expanding our knowledge and understanding of Web3, cryptocurrencies, blockchain technology, in particular within the context of DeFi and investments? That will be a quite lengthy list. I actually, on my website, megankaspar.com/resources, I have a good amount of resources listed there that can be accessed at any time, of books that I really have enjoyed reading and have learned a lot from over the years, articles, podcasts, and of course, if you have not read the Bitcoin white paper, I highly suggest reading that. That's a really good start. And then as far as DeFi and investments, there are tons of Twitter lists and people on Twitter. Pretty much everyone I follow on Twitter, they're either in the digital fashion realm or crypto blockchain. So just going through that list and following those people is a really good resource to learn about DeFi and crypto. And the next question is, you've spoken about wallet adoption as an obstacle impeding the decentralization of the fashion industry. How do you predict wallets will evolve in order to streamline onboarding for those new to DeFi and Web3? So the wallet adoption, the issues around wallet adoption that exist today for traditional brands and the fashion industry is very different from DeFi. So DeFi wallet adoption has come out of crypto native users. So similar to the global finance industry and the traditional finance industry, we haven't seen them adopt the use of wallet, right? There's no Connect wallet on your banking website yet. Hopefully one day there will be. But it speaks to the fact that it's not super easy. There's still a lot of issues with seed phrases, and it's not super intuitive. It's not 2 clicks and it's set up. So I think that there will be massive disruption and innovation around the UI and UX of the wallets for users in the coming years, for sure. Next question is, could you discuss the importance of tokenization and DAOs within the blockchain and Web3 ecosystem? This is a very packed full question. But to me, the democratization of assets, so the potential of tokenization to democratize access to assets, this means that assets which were once available to certain groups can now be fractionalized and made available to a broader audience, which is really important. There's a lot of barriers to entry in the traditional finance industry, especially investments. There are barriers that one has to cross in order to make certain investments or have access to certain financial products. Whereas with crypto, it's fully open and decentralized. So anyone that has access to being able to purchase to a cell phone, technically, to purchase crypto can then use a decentralized exchange and participate, invest, acquire different cryptocurrencies, products on the chain, as well as NFTs. This is a really big differentiating factor, and it's really important, I think, to our whole global economy for economic inclusion. So that's also an important factor that is tokenization can make various assets more accessible. Excuse me. It also provides more liquidity and allows more people to participate in these economic activities that were previously excluded. So it's really creating a more financial and economic inclusion environment. And then as far as DAOs, I think the reinvention of our financial services are slowly happening through tokenization, but also through the use of DAO structures. The power of decentralization and the entire blockchain space fosters DAOs, and they really represent this key aspect to providing a model for decentralized governance, where decisions are made by the collective rather than a centralized authority, which leads to empowerment and autonomy. So it empowers the individual, and the DAOs and tokenized assets are sort of a part of this narrative, giving individuals more direct control over their investments and ownership and participation in the organization. And this leads to new organizational structures that are revolutionary. So if you look at ways that investments and decisions are generally made in the traditional finance world through the traditional fund structures, it's this GP, general partner, and LP, limited partner structure, where the GPs take fees for managing all of the decision making and manage the portfolio, and the LPs are primarily just capital providers, and they really don't have transparency or decision making participation in how the capital flows. Whereas a DAO structure is more open. So similar to Red DAO, which is why I love Red so much, is this decentralized factor in that we're all contributing capital, and then we make decisions together based on voting that's weighted according to your capital contribution. So it's really this more fair, aligned structure, whereas the GPLP structure incentives are not aligned. And these DAO structures really give rise to new kinds of operational structures and consensus mechanisms that are, again, different than the hierarchical structures of the traditional finance system. And then the evolution of online platforms can also arise through DAOs. So DAOs could represent the next evolution of platforms that enable more community-driven development and governance. So again, Red DAO would be another good example of this. And instead of platforms being controlled by centralized entities, DAOs really allow users to have a direct stake in their development and operation. And this is where I think Web3 starts to show how the next phase of the internet becomes the future through tokenization. And that's the core component of um, providing an economic layer that was completely lacking in Web 2. And this economic layer can fund and incentivize decentralized development of online platforms and services, which now leads me to the innovation of fundraising and how tokenization can offer innovative methods for startup companies and projects to raise capital. So in 2017, this was really the first example of this, where we saw a rise of what was called the ICO, initial coin offering. And then we had something called, which hasn't yet, and I still think will become more of a mature market in the future, STO, security token offering. I think that we probably won't use the word ICO or initial coin offering in anytime soon, but people are still doing this. They're raising capital by issuing tokens, calling them token issuances. We've really sort of gotten away from the ICO word, but this is exactly what it is. It's raising capital for tokens instead of equity, or in light of providing equity. So let's see, the next question is, with Web 2 having laid the foundation for the rise of e-commerce, do you think Web 3 will immerse us further into a virtual economy that will rival that of the real world economy? If so, do you predict Web 3 and blockchain technology will shape consumers' interactions with goods and services? 1000%. That's why I'm still doing what I do every day, and I'm so passionate, because I do think that all of the sort of exploitative extraction models of Web 2, the centralization that doesn't allow the users to own their data and have, create value for themselves in ways that they could, but they're being sort of prevented. This Web3 unlocks all of that. So yeah, I'm very bullish on that, and I think that it will definitely, I have conversations every day with founders, and last night, one in particular, they were just like, wow, in the next 5 years, Megan, it's going to be so incredible to see this world that we're all building and creating together. And it's true, over the last 12 years, what I've witnessed in crypto and blockchain has been incredible, but I think it's just the momentum is building much faster, and more people in the world are using the technology. So in the next 5 years, I suspect we're going to have a lot of new business models and ways to create and generate revenue that we previously couldn't. The next question is the inclusion of the inclusion of utilities within an NFT can significantly enhance its appeal to potential buyers. What types of utilities do you believe consumers are most interested in? Do you see real world utilities and rewards being more in demand than digital? Excuse me. So I think that for now, with every wave of innovation in crypto, you see hype cycles. So the last hype cycle, we were able to see digital, people really wanting just digital, right? Digital only AFPs, access into communities. This was all digital and not tied to physical. I think that to onboard this next cycle, it will provide more than access and more than the digital flex. It will be something that's tied to a physical item as well, so phygital. And again, it's something that provides a new way to make money in a way that you previously couldn't. So, for example, being able to compensate someone for wearing a specific item, and using that item in a certain geographic location, having that data and being able to compensate them for that, I think is another business model that we're going to see. Maybe it's called where to earn, maybe it's called something else, but having that foundational purpose with a physical item connected to a digital, I think is really sort of the path forward for a new utility for NFT. And let's see, that was the last question. It looks like we're done for now, unless there are any more.
As mentioned, as if anybody has any questions that follow on from the ones in the document, please feel free to ask. If not, we can also wrap this session up in like 5 minutes. We can wait a while we wait to answer any more questions. Please feel free to unmute or request a mic or ask via the chat as well. And just as a refresher, I'm going to post the link to the questions here. There's also a section here that talks a little bit about Megan's background, if you might be interested and if there are any questions you'd like to ask. And of course, Megan, feel free to turn down any questions if they are inappropriate, etc. Megan, I think you've received a question via the chat. I'm just going to ping you here again in case you haven't been able to see it.
Yes, I see. Going back to monitoring advancements within Web3 and blockchain technology, what cities or parts of the world do you see as hubs for innovation within the space? That's a really good question. So I've spent a lot of, specifically, I'll speak to digital fashion first, because it's really interesting. Over 90% of the deal flow that I've found in digital fashion space has come from London. The next is sort of distributed all over Paris, the United States, in Brazil, Spain. The primary bulk of it has been in London, which is really interesting. When we look at blockchain and Web3 in general, a lot coming out of, well, Ethereum came from Miami. I don't know if many people know that, but the guys were in Miami building it there. But they were distributed at the time too, as well, you know, talking to many investors and people around the world. But London, Paris, New York, Austin, Texas, obviously Silicon Valley, Palo Alto. Still a lot of founders and investors based in these, excuse me, based in these areas, focused around Web3 and blockchain. And Miami has also been sort of a hub, but yeah, the most interesting statistic and data point that I love to share is London really being the hub for Web3 fashion, which I think is really cool because Paris is known for sort of the traditional fashion hub. So it'll be interesting to see in the next coming 2 decades how how Web3 in London has really transforms the fashion industry as a global whole. Let's see. Hi, Megan. I really want to join your talk, Investing in Web3. So I'm not sure if Mickey, if you mean for the talk Wednesday, just ping me. Like I said, anyone who wants to ping me on Twitter or Instagram, my team will get a SYKY Keystone NFT over to you so that you can get into the Discord and join the talk on Wednesday. The next question. Shoot. Let's see. Right, air garment, which isn't perfect. Yeah, I think Kay, you're speaking to the Hot Living article that we did. There were 9 different outfits, and the team. There was an image of me in a white Fendi top, and it looks digital. It looks sort of fake. And the other images, it's really hard for people to tell. Unless you have a really specific eye. So when the image came back, DressX actually did all the images. They did a great job. They didn't specifically want to use that one. And I said, no, I think we should because it shows where we are today, digital fashion, and where we will be in the future. And, even now when I see similar garments affixed to images, it's gotten way better. So yeah, it's a really interesting thing. See, what garments would you like to see in AR and are not yet made? That's also a really good question. So there's a book coming out at the end of December and January from from a co-founder based in Paris, from the NFT Factory. And this Undocs book is really interesting because they had a few of us put together items that we would wear on our avatars. And everyone in this space sort of does these super magical, mystical, metaverse-like wearables that they've chosen. For me, that's just not my personality. Like I'm very much more aligned to photorealism and luxury and in the traditional sense, which I would love to see carried over. So there are a few garments, but I would love to see more of the high-end designers and brands do a lot more in AR and also digital wearables. One of my favorite things they did sort of as a marketing tool for an AR try-on were the Dior rose earrings on Instagram filters. When I found that, I was super excited because it's, we're getting there where brands are actually utilizing and harnessing the technology for different mechanics. Let's see, what are some easy and practical first steps that brands can take in creating token-gated experiences for their customer base? So there's some platforms like Calendar that can make it really easy for brands. Unless brands have an internal team or external consultants and advisors that can help them technically, it can be much easier and a lighter load for them to harness and use sort of a third party to launch token gating in the beginning until they, I feel like it's kind of like the early days of the internet where brands were slowly creating websites and then slowly putting products on to sell. The tools, and the middleware quite wasn't yet there in the beginning. we're sort of seeing the same thing in Web3. So again, there's platforms like Co-Create and then also Calder, which I really love. I think can be the easiest way and super practical for brands to use the technology in order to initiate easy UI and UX token gated experiences for their customers. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Me too, Victoria. Miami on Miami being a hub for digital fashion. Yeah, I think for sure. Miami. I'm an advisor to Miami Fashion Week's Web3 initiatives, and there's a lot in Miami that's slowly growing, and I think over time it can definitely be a hub for the U.S. for sure. I think that's it for the questions.
I
Yeah, this
think
is
if
great.
we don't have any more questions, oh, sorry.
Oh no, I
Go
just
ahead.
see many of you have messaged me about the keystone for Psyche for the talk on Wednesday. So yeah, I'll definitely make sure that everyone is able to have access to that as well.
Fantastic, and thank you very much. I was just gonna say, if we don't have any more questions, we can totally wrap up like 10 minutes early. I see we also have a couple of visitors here from outside the residency. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat as well. We're always open to, inviting more people from the wider community to join our AMAs. Oh yeah. Before, just while we're waiting for any more questions, if there are, could I ask if anybody has any more follow up questions after, like, after the session? Would they be free to email, DM, or ask you questions some other way?
Yeah, for sure. Twitter, X, I guess. I don't know if I'll ever be able to call Twitter X. I'll probably always
Yeah,
call it Twitter.
same.
It's so hard. It's so strange to call it X. But maybe the next wave of users and adopters of the platform will be able to much more easily be able to call it X. But yeah, for sure, DM me LinkedIn, Instagram, or on X, Twitter. And we're pretty quick to respond, usually within 24 hours. So if you have any questions that you come up with later, always happy to answer them.
Fantastic. Well, I'll take the silence from the chat that we don't have any more questions at the moment. So I'd just like to say, on behalf of all the residents and the residency, thank you very much for coming to our AMA and and answering our questions. And yeah, and have a great night, everybody.
Thank you so much, guys.